Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our Emeritus Professorial Lecture Series. This series honors our distinguished emeritus professors as they transition to the next phase of their careers, and it is truly my pleasure to be here with you today to honor Aviel Rubin, an emeritus professor of computer science. Avi's research has focused on computer security and applied cryptography, and encompasses the full scope of information security issues, from hacking and healthcare cybersecurity to high-tech litigation. He is the sought-after expert on electronic voting and election tampering, who has briefed Congress and high-ranking Army officials at the Pentagon on these matters, as well as others concerning national security. He's served as an expert witness for numerous court cases involving technology litigation and has given TED Talks on hacking in an increasingly connected world. Avi has had an impressive career, truly an impressive career. He's the author of the book Brave New Ballot, The Battle to Safeguard Democracy in the Age of Electronic Voting. And I have to say here, a topic of concern as we approach the next round of voting in this country. In addition to 2 books on web security, numerous journal articles and book chapters, he is the founder of Harbor Labs, a company that provides security consulting, professional training, and technical expertise. And he was the former technical director of the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. He previously also directed JHU's Health and Medical Security Lab, a collaboration between ISI and informatics researchers at the Johns Hopkins Medical Institutions. He and his papers have won numerous awards, including a 2009 Google Research Award, a 2004 Electronic Frontiers Foundation Pioneer Award, and he was named the 2004 Baltimorean of the Year by Baltimore Magazine for his work in safeguarding the election process. Avi is a respected educator and colleague, and the Whiting School has greatly benefited from his achievements and partnerships. And I understand that, surprisingly, he is now changing direction in his technical activities and studying hydrodynamics, I was told. Apparently so. Nonetheless, as he begins his next phase of his career, we wish him well on his next endeavors. So, congratulations, Avi. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Randall Burns, the Bill and Lisa Stromberg Department Head and Professor of Computer Science. Randall.
Avi. So I knew that Ed was going to hit all the highlights. So what I did prepare is I went and I watched all the YouTube videos of Shriners roasts that I could find, and it was pretty enlightening. So Avi, one of the first things I did as a professor at Johns Hopkins was watch Avi's interview. It was literally my second day here, and I was impressed. Avi, a little bit senior to me in life, quite a bit senior to me in computer science, and I started tracking this guy's career. And Avi hit it big almost immediately. 2004, his second year here, he's electronic voting. He's the darling of Washington, D.C. The next year, there's this big RFID security thing, 2005. And I say to myself, you know, I'm a lot like Avi. I mean, we're both handsome. We have good hair. We're charismatic. We're tall. And so I said, I'm going to be like Avi. And so I was working on auditable file systems at the time. So these are file systems that leave a trail of all the actions that are taken against them. I'm like, I can do this too. And Sarbanes-Oxley is the relevant piece of literature. And I'm like, I'm going to wave the flag for Sarbanes-Oxley, and I'm going to be the Sarbanes-Oxley CS expert. And needless to say, this is when I discovered that I am not Avi, because somehow Sarbanes-Oxley wasn't as attractive to the media as electronic voting or RFID cracking. Who knew? Avi. So Avi went on to do an incredible amount of work, web transactions, distributed eCash, and then transitioned into medical records and medical devices and has testified for all of this, but you heard that from Ed. And Baltimorean of the Year, that's a thing that I also haven't won, but as we've covered, I'm not Avi. I also want to comment on Avi as a citizen. So there was a time when we had a teaching crisis and we asked Avi to teach networks. And he quietly, gently, professorially stepped in and took over this massive course, then went on to teach it again in COVID and went on to teach it again in 2022, which was a great service to the department. It was fulfilling for him, as he reported. And that's the kind of lemonade story that is Avi's career and my experience with him as a colleague. Avi has a history of April Fool's jokes. He is known for this. And so I went back and I collected a decade of them. And to kind of remember Avi, not that he's dead, but so it started with, the first one I found was on this science of poker class he was teaching, where he was going to teach the kids how to cheat and take them on field trips to Atlantic City. This is one of several stories that actually became almost true. So it was, as far as I can tell, Avi's leading his life from April Fool's jokes that become reality. The other one would be his 2018 message, which was that I'm becoming the captain of a merchant marine 250-ton vessel. And I don't think it's 250 tons, but I think Avi does have a special captain's license. He was indicted for illegal business practices and nepotism. He consulted as a hacker movie on a hacker movie for the producers of 24. And then, to end my story and my time, I got a note in mid-March 2023 where Avi instructed me that he was retiring. And I was, oh, I know what this is. And so I look at the corner of my computer, and I look at the corner of my computer, and it is March something. So, and with that, Avi retired, and he apparently retired from April Fool's jokes at the same time, or 2 weeks later. And with that, Avi, you've been an amazing colleague. I really appreciate the time we spent together. And it is my pleasure to introduce Paul Martin, who is the Vice President of Research and Technology at Harbor Labs, works with Avi there still. He's an expert in embedded system security, OS security, network protocol analysis, reverse engineering, and is also a graduate of Johns Hopkins in 2016 on medical devices, wrote a thesis that was delightful. And Paul, please.
Thanks, Randall. And good afternoon, everybody. I am Paul Martin, and it's both an honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Aviel Rubin for his Emeritus lecture here at Johns Hopkins University. As we gather here today to celebrate Avi's long and illustrious career, I want to extend a warm welcome to each of you and a special acknowledgement to Avi's family, with his wife, Anne, his parents, Abba and Carol, his brother, Yaakov, and his daughter, Alana, all here with us today. Joining us by video are his children, Tamara and Benny, and his PhD advisor, Peter Honeyman. I think they're on video somewhere. Is that right? Plenty. Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah. Well, just take that line out. When I first arrived at Hopkins as a freshman, Avi was already a legend in the field. He was famous for leading an effort to find vulnerabilities in debug voting machines, and he had his own Wikipedia page to prove it. His work had been covered on the front page of Slashdot, and he had appeared on the screensavers on Tech TV, I think 3 times. To an 18-year-old in 2007, that's a big deal. Nowadays, maybe those references are a bit dated, but at the time, trust me, that was a huge deal. Needless to say, I was a bit intimidated. I think it took me a year or two to actually have a real conversation with Avi, even though he was my advisor. Most of our initial meetings were just me saying, okay, yeah. And once I did, though, Avi's warmth and humor really shined through. Avi's been a mentor, a friend, and a confidant, and he's guided me through all aspects of my life. Avi likes to tell people that he's from Manhattan, and he is. He's from Manhattan, Kansas, to be precise. His parents were both professors, his mother in mechanical engineering and his father in English literature. As a child, Avi moved from Kansas to New York, to where I guess there's a real Manhattan, I've been told, to Israel, to Alabama, and finally to Nashville before attending the University of Michigan and starting his career. At Michigan, Avi met Bernie Galler, his undergraduate advisor and later co-advisor for his PhD. Bernie was more than just a mentor. He was like a father to Avi, shaping not just his academic pursuits, but also his deep commitment to student well-being and advising. This relationship profoundly influenced Avi's own approach to mentorship, embedding in him a genuine concern for his students' lives beyond the classroom. I'm just one of many students whose lives have been touched by Avi. Other students of Avi's are here today. In fact, Logan, Mike, who did his PhD with me. So welcome to you guys as well. But it's just a testament to how much Avi's touched all of us that, they come out. Oh, well, I don't think I met you, but we'll talk after this. Um, Professionally, Avi's career is nothing short of extraordinary. Avi's research has dealt with many of the world's most critical issues, including electronic voting security, trustworthy health and wellness, and Internet of Things security. Avi's been an author on more than 99 publications. He's advised 10 PhD students and has been on the dissertation committee of another 9. He's an inventor on 10 patents. He's chaired 3 of the Big 4 security conferences. He was a Fulbright scholar at Tel Aviv University. He's been a guest on Diane Rehm. His research has been featured on 60 Minutes, on The Today Show, on The Daily Show. To put it mildly, Avi is an accomplished academic. However, his contributions extend beyond academia as well. Avi's assisted in the drafting of federal legislation. He's testified about the need for secure voting machines before Congress, and he's even provided security briefings to 4-star generals of the Pentagon. Avi's journey is a testament to the role a dedicated individual can play in shaping a safer and more secure world. Whatever Avi does, he does 100%. Outside of his professional life, Avi has many diverse interests. He's a Michigan sports fanatic. He buys every Apple device on release day, except for the Vision Pro. Even Avi has standards. He's also quite a poker player. He has played in the World Series of Poker several times, and he even taught a poker course at Hopkins so that his daughter, Alana, could experience having her dad as a professor. Apparently, this is a thing that Alana wanted to experience. It's a good thing. And let's not forget Avi's latest obsession, pickleball. Apparently, he plays so hard that he managed to crack a pair of safety goggles, but he was able to put them back together because he's also very good at fixing things. Perhaps Avi's greatest love, though, other than his family, is boating. Avi's been a prolific sailor for as long as I've known him. As a PhD advisor, Avi would occasionally hold lab meetings out on the Inner Harbor, which made him very cool for a PhD advisor. I'm just going to throw that out there. More recently, Avi earned his commercial captain's license, and he can now often be found joining Zoom meetings from his newest boat, the Empty Nest, a boat that he's so passionate about that he even made it his full-time home for the last 6 months in Key West. Avi even manages to do retirement 100%. The theme of Avi's lecture today is Tikkun Olam, a Hebrew expression meaning fixing the world. From his early days in industry research labs at Bellcore and AT&T, tackling challenges in web's privacy and secure remote access, to his impactful tenure here at Hopkins, his work has indeed been a relentless pursuit of Tikkun Olam. Avi has dedicated his life to improving security and privacy on the internet, and he has made a profound impact on his field that can be felt in areas from IoT to medical devices to voting machines and beyond. As we sit here, ready to hear from Avi, we're not just celebrating a brilliant career, we're celebrating a man who blends wisdom with wit, seriousness with humor, and professional rigor with personal warmth. Avi, congratulations on your incredible journey, your profound impact, and the many lives you've touched and inspired along the way. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Aviel Rubin for his Emeritus lecture.
Thanks. That's great. Oh, wow. I guess after those comments from everyone, there's nothing else I need to say because you've covered everything I've done in my career. But I was very excited when I was invited to give an emeritus lecture. And I asked myself, what's an emeritus lecture? I didn't know exactly what to do. Am I supposed to go in and take one of my research projects and do a deep dive, very, very technical? Or should I talk about the journey that I had, like in my career, and what have I done? So for preparation, I went back. The previous emeritus lectures were recorded and online, and I watched them. So I recognize even people in the audience who gave those. And I decided, well, you know, Andrew Douglas and his said that people like anecdotes more than they like formulas. And so I'll do that. And you know what? If I mess this up, what are they going to do? Fire me? So like Paul said, Tikkun Olam, it's one of my favorite expressions. It's something that was emphasized at my kids' schools, which is literally means fixing the world, but it's really used to say making the world a better place. And what I thought in my career, what I wanted to do is make cyberspace a better, safer place. And so I'm going to recap my career and talk about it. I'll talk about how I got here, the path that I took, how I defined my academic career. And that was some of the reflection that I did. I thought, I'm giving this emeritus lecture. It really was a chance for reflection. So I went back and read a lot of my old papers and started to get a little nostalgic. And I thought about, what is it that I wanted to accomplish when I started my career? And then what did I actually accomplish? So I'll talk about both of those. And then I'll give some research highlights. And I'm going to do one very fast deep dive into one of my projects because I just feel like I have to do that. I have to show you some formulas. But I'm not going to do it at the speed in which I would be explaining or teaching it. I'm going to do it at the speed in which you can kind of see that there are formulas and that, it's real research. And then I'm going to wrap up by talking about what I'm doing now and what I expect to do next in my career now that I've retired from Hopkins. So before I dive into it, I have a lot of people to thank, and I don't have pictures of everyone that I need to thank, but these are the people I did have pictures of. So I'll start out by thanking Anne, my wife. She has been by my side since I met her in 1993 when I was a grad student. And credit to Anne, she's been living on a boat with me alone for the last 6 months and hasn't killed me yet. I don't know how she does it. I want to thank my parents. It was mentioned earlier. I always talk about my dad a lot, but I want to give a shout out to my mom, who is herself an emeritus professor of mechanical engineering. And she led her career at a time when it was a lot harder for women to have a career like that, while also raising 4 children, cooking a lot of dinners for the family. And so I'm just really impressed and proud of my mom, and I wanted to say so here. Also, thank my kids. Ilana was able to be here. She is a 2-time Hopkins alum. She got her bachelor's and her master's here and is now a school teacher in an elementary school here in Baltimore. And my twins, Benny and Tamara, who said they would tune into the live stream. Hello, if you're there. They're doing semesters abroad in Amsterdam and Budapest right now. My JHU colleagues, like Randall, when I came here, it was over 20 years ago, and I found this to be a collaborative, friendly environment. 2 department chairs, Rao and Randall, each went in on some of my April Fool's jokes with me, and we had a lot of fun with that, and that's how I value people. So that was great. And of course, my students over the year. I have some peer collaborators outside of Hopkins that I would like to thank. In particular, my 2 closest collaborators are Carl Gunter at Illinois and David Coates at Dartmouth. And as I'll show you, we've done so much work together over the years. My advisors, Peter Honeyman, who I'll talk a little bit about in some detail, and Bernie Galler, who was a real personal mentor to me. Rao Kasaraju was department chair who hired me here. I want to thank him for that. And Jerry Mason, who I miss very, very much. Jerry was the person that brought me to Hopkins. He recruited me, he made me come here, and I had such a great time with him when we were at the Institute together. And finally, the staff in the department. If you're here all the time, you don't see how great it is compared to other places, but with Laura and Kim and the team, they are just phenomenal. So thanks to everybody. I've got some pictures here of some of the people that I mentioned. So let me go to the beginning and say that I started out grad school, my first semester, September of 1989, and I was in Elliot Soloway's AI lab. I don't know how many of you know Elliot, but this didn't go very well. Elliot and I did not see eye to eye. And so after one semester, I left. And, lucky thing too, because AI never went anywhere, as we all know. So then I was trying to find an area to do my research in. And my favorite course by far was compilers. I loved building a compiler. I then took the second compilers class, started asking around about who was doing compilers research. Maybe I could find a field. I don't know if you guys know the book, Are You My Mother? But that's how I felt, going around to each professor like, can I work with you? What are you doing? And I received advice, don't go into programming languages because there are no more interesting projects to do, and then there won't be, it's dead. And of course, this is 6 years before Java and Python and before object-oriented programming took off. And so that wasn't the best advice that I ever got. But on the other hand, I've really enjoyed my policy work, and I haven't seen too many congressional hearings on just-in-time compiling. And so maybe it's good that I ended up in something else. So I moved to a lab called IVHS, Intelligent Vehicle Highway Systems. And in Intelligent Vehicle Highway Systems, IVHS, there were all these workshops and conferences. And so I threw myself into it. This was going to be my research area. We're in Michigan. They make all the cars. And so it's natural that they would have funding for this. And it turns out that one of the most widely used acronyms was Automatic Vehicle Identification, AVI. And so people would laugh at my name tag when I would go to workshops and say, oh, you're AVI, haha. No, that's just my name. And IVHS work was much more EE focused than what I wanted to do. I learned a lot about GPS, wireless communication protocols, queuing, et cetera. And I wasn't really interested or engaged. And so I got frustrated, and that was like a very unhappy time for me in grad school. Meanwhile, I passed all the things I needed to do. Students have it very easy today, but we had to do 3-4-hour written exams, walk uphill both ways, take oral exams. I got through all that, and I didn't have any research to work on. So me around my second year of grad school, very miserable. And then the best day of grad school happened. And this is because the IVHS seminar had Peter Honeyman, who came to give a guest lecture. And he spoke about the Needham and Schroeder protocol. The Needham and Schroeder protocol formed the basis of the Kerberos system and the distributed computing environment. And because this was pre-TLS, SSL, pre-IPsec, this was in fact, I believe, the most widely used security protocol that was going on at the time. And it was all based on this Needham and Schroeder protocol of distributing keys in a trustworthy environment. And when that was over, I went back to Bernie Galler, who had adopted me again as my advisor, and said, that was the most interesting talk I've ever seen. No, that's actually the most interesting thing I've ever heard. And so he introduced me to Peter, and Peter was tough. He was kind of strict with me and took me on as a student, but he said, I was on probation. And he said to me, you have to read at least one paper every day. Very often, I want you to read a lot more than one paper every day. And in those days, that wasn't easy because to get a paper, what I had to do is go take a bus to another campus, go into the library. I know Sue remembers these days. Go to the stacks, pull out the paper, photocopy the paper. And then, of course, Peter wanted me to make 2 copies so I could give one to him. And then I would take a bunch of, my loot back to my room, read those papers, and then go through the bibliographies to see what are the papers that everybody's citing. Next day, go back to the library and find those papers, repeat, et cetera. I did that for 6 months, and I was trying to learn about security, networking, and cryptography. And by the way, I was still miserable because I didn't have any research, and I wanted to do research. And then I might be dramatic to say that this is the paper that changed my life. In fact, we can't even see all the words, but it says my life where it says JHU is talking. And this was a paper by Butler Lamson, Turing Award winner, and several other very famous researchers. And the title of the paper is Authentication in Distributed Systems Theory and Practice. This paper appeared in ACM Transactions on Computing Systems. You'll see November of '92, but actually this wasn't the paper I found. I found the earlier SOSP version of this paper. This is one of the seminal papers in my field, and it gave a calculus for reasoning about computer security protocols. And in fact, that calculus led to the band logic by Burroughs, Abadi, and Needham, 2 of the authors of this paper, which was used to find flaws in many published security protocols, including Needham and Schroeder, as would be. So I read this paper, and the reason this paper changed my life is that there was a section 7.2, about long-running computations. And it said, what about delegation to a process that needs to keep running after the user is logged out, such as a batch job? We have not worked out the details of this scheme. It is a tricky exercise in balancing the demands of convenience, availability, and security. Disconnected operation raises similar issues. And I read that over and over, and I said, aha, this is a research problem. They said they haven't solved it. It's hard. So I took this to Peter, and I said, Peter, look, look, they say that this is a hard problem. Can I work on this? And I'm not very good with impressions, and I wouldn't try to imitate Peter, but he likes to get very excited and raise his voice. And he pointed at me, and I thought I was in trouble, and I said something stupid. And he goes, if you solve this, if you do that, you are going to get a fantastic paper and you're going to get your PhD. This is a great idea. And like I needed more motivation, I was already super excited to work on this. So I locked myself in the lab and I worked on this. And I devised a protocol for, so the problem was that if you had a job running in Kerberos, Kerberos used tickets to distribute keys that you use to communicate with servers. And those tickets expired typically in 24 hours. So what happens if you have a job that had to run for 3 hours and the ticket expired? So the operator would have to come back to the computer and restart a process in order to allow that job to continue. And very often the job would just crash. So I came up with a key refresh protocol and I implemented it, and I used the Kerberos framework to do that. And I had, lo and behold, my first paper, which is long-running jobs in an authenticated environment. And this was published at Usenix Security, and I started getting very, very excited in this field. And I will not continue about my PhD, but there was no turning back after that. I not only built it, I distributed it. It got adopted by DCE, a user group formed. There was a lot of mailing, and I answered and went and spoke around about it. And this ended up being a kind of a key part of my thesis. I also kind of found it cool that my defense was February 18th of 1994, which is 30 years and 4 days ago to this day. And at that defense, there were 2 people in the room other than me who are here today, and that is Anne and my brother Yaakov. Yaakov was an undergrad at Michigan at the time, and I guess Anne and Yaakov may not have understood too much of what I was talking about. Hopefully they'll understand more today. So let me go to what I wanted to accomplish. And the answer is, who knows? I did not have a master plan. And in fact, I don't think, looking back 30 years, it's possible to have a master plan because technology changes so fast. And there's no way that you can know what's going to happen in 20 years or even 10 years. And so what I did is I just did research. I found problems that I liked and I worked on them. But I followed a certain guidance, which was I liked building things. I liked writing code and building systems that people used. I liked analyzing things, breaking things. But writing code and having other people download and use that code, I think was what I really enjoyed the most at the time. And I wanted to make a difference. I didn't want to just the output of my career to be a bunch of papers. I wanted to do something that changed the world, Tikkun Olam. And let me just say a word about mentorship because Paul mentioned in the introduction about Bernie Galler and Peter Honeyman. There's no way that I could have gotten out of grad school or had the career that I had without the people that really carried me. And Peter Honeyman was tough love, but he really did teach me how to be a researcher. Bernie Galler taught me a really important lesson, which is that the students are people and they have a lot going on in their lives. And it's not enough just to help them with their papers and their research. You have to consider the whole person and be there for them. And I had other mentors that I wanted to mention. Bill Aiello and David Mayer were my supervisors at AT&T, and Steve Belvin and Bill Cheswick were senior collaborators of mine that I learned a lot from. And so I made it an objective of mine to mentor my students and my junior colleagues. These are the PhD students that I produced. Slight correction to what Paul said. I was major advisor for 19 students, but 4 of them were the Doctor of Engineering students. The rest were PhDs. And 2 of them, Logan and David, are in the room, and they're future PhDs, and we're going to make sure that they get through that. So let me talk a little briefly about building things. I'm going to make it brief because in my inaugural professorship lecture, I talked about building and breaking things, and I still do that. And so I have the Kerberized app, which was my long-running jobs project. I built something called Bellcore's Trusted Software Integrity System, BETSI. Initially, it was the software, what was it? Bellcore's Trusted Software Integrity System without the trusted, it was BSIS. And Anne said, you're not calling your system BSIS. So I came up with a better acronym. Crowds is the work that to this day I think most known for in the research circles. By far my highest number of citations, over 3,000 citations for that work. And that was work that I did to with MicroWriter to browse the web anonymously. But this is where I learned one of the tricks of the trade that I'm happy to pass along, which is the reason that so many papers referenced it is that there's a group of researchers at UMass who know a lot more math than I do, and they found some technical flaws in crowds. Weren't very happy to hear that, but it created a rash of research that grew out of that. And despite the fact that the conclusion was that we were wrong, everybody had to cite us when they were talking about it. So if you want a lot of citations, you should introduce some kind of a flaw into your papers, and you can achieve that. Let me talk about breaking things. And this has been mentioned in the introductions. We broke the Texas Instrument RFID system, where we were able to walk around with a backpack of the equipment that we built and ping somebody's car immobilizer or their gas station wireless token, and then go to the gas station and buy gas charged to their account. And we did that with the 2020 show. And we had several different projects around breaking system. The most famous one was the Diebold voting system. And let me talk a little bit about making an impact. So as was mentioned, I testified many times. The thing that I enjoyed the most, I would say, was working with Rush Holt, Congressman from New Jersey, with his staffers to draft some legislation about paper records and voting machines. And that was an incredible experience. So rather than talk about all the different papers or projects I've written, I found that if I focused on the grants that I got, I could get through kind of a good overview of my journey. So some people can get, they'll get a $750 grant, and then they'll get $1 million grant, and every 3 years they have to get more grants. What worked for me, and wouldn't work for everyone, but I liked to be part of big centers. And so I had several small grants, but really my whole career focused on 4 grants. The first one was Accurate. We were very big on acronyms. A Center for Correct, Usable, Reliable, Auditable, and Transparent Elections. That took more work than some of the research papers to come up with. It was 5 years, $7.5 million, and I was the PI and the center director. And besides learning all about these political and research problems, the thing I learned the most, and Ed can attest to this, is that I do not like management or administration, and I never wanted to be in charge of anything again. And so the next grant that I got was with the colleagues I mentioned, Carl and Dave. The rest of all my grants were with those guys, who kind of formed the core of all the centers. Was led by Carl, and it was the Sharps grant, and this was from the Health and Human Services. This was a bigger grant, $15.5 million, and I was co-PI on the grant. And for each of these, I'm going to go through and talk about what the most interesting research problems were. And one thing I learned also is that ONC is not like NSF. So with NSF, you get a grant, you do the research, you report it, great. With ONC, we had a 5-year grant, and there were things that we proposed to do in year 5, and by the time we got to year 4, they didn't make sense anymore. So we went to ONC and we're like, hey, can we do this instead? It's just as much work. And they're like, we signed a contract, you said you're going to do this. So we did some things that didn't make any sense and submitted it because that's what they wanted. But I recommend try to get NSF money if I'm giving any advice. Next, I set up the Health and Medical Security Lab here, and we got the SATSI, a Frontiers grant, which is 5-year, $10 million, and on trusted health and wellness. This is the one I'm going to take a little bit of a dive into one project. And then the latest one is another SATSI Frontiers. And by the way, a 5-year grant is really a 7-year grant because you can get no cost extensions. And so my entire 21 years here was pretty much covered by these grants. I always had enough funding for the students that I wanted in my lab. So let me talk about Accurate for a second. Accurate was after we found the flaws in the Diebold system and started getting a lot of press, I was thinking, well, what can we do to fix it? So we came up with proposed research that if we do this research, maybe we can have more electronic voting than we had. And so one of the big questions that we asked was, how do you build a system where you don't trust the manufacturer? Okay? not just the manufacturers. So the chips are built in China, and we don't trust China. And the software is built at Microsoft. You may or may not trust Microsoft. And anyone along the production line, even the truck that delivers the voting machine to the polls, is an opportunity for someone to cause some mischief. So the research centered around building systems out of untrusted components that can still have trust in them. And so a lot of the papers that we wrote were around these problems. I also ran a class project that some people in the room have been part of, either doing it or TAing with me for it, which is it harder to hide malicious code in software than it is to find malicious code in software? And so the class would split up into blue team and red team, and we would give them software, or they would write software or find software. I didn't really care. And then insert backdoors into it, and then hand it over to the other team. And the other team would look for those backdoors. And what we found is the creativity is unbelievable, and it is so much easier to hide backdoors and malicious software in software than it is to find it. And that's when you know that it's there. So normally when you're evaluating a voting system software, you assume that there's nothing there. But here, students who knew it was there couldn't find it a lot of the time. And then there was the policy component to Accurate. We did a lot of outreach. And here's an interesting twist, is that recently, it's been very difficult because a lot of election deniers are pointing to research that my colleagues and I did and saying, see, these scientists are saying the election was stolen, you know? And it's like, no, we didn't say the election was stolen. We said there are vulnerabilities in these voting machines if they're used a certain way. So you have to be really careful in politics, because people will take, you know, what you said. And I've been working as an expert witness in some of the litigation that you might be reading about around the voting machines. And you know, in my deposition, they'll say to me, okay, so you said that these machines are vulnerable and can be hacked, right? I said, well, not really, sort of, maybe, but that doesn't mean that I'm saying that that happened, which is what people are trying to say I was saying. So the next two health-related were Trusted Health and Wellness, which is THAW, and Secure Health Information Technology, which we called SHARPS because the default acronym didn't sit very well. And there are various interesting problems that we worked on there. One of the things was at Hopkins Hospital, when I was doing this work, I toured around various branches of the hospital with different doctors, and I asked them, show me your IT, explain to me what you think your security problems are. I want to do research in this area, so I want to know what's going on. And over I heard, there are 8,000 people that have access to every single medical record at this hospital. And so that kind of stimulated some research that we did. But in order to show you that, I want to show you the work that we built upon. So there's a seminal, one of the most famous papers in cryptography by Dan Boneh and Matt Franklin. And it's just fun tidbit for me is that Dan Boneh was in my group at Bellcore and Matt Franklin was in my group at AT&T Labs. So they move on. Boneh went to Stanford. Franklin went to UC, I think, Davis. And they found, so Ed, how do I say this? Whale pairings? I don't know how to pronounce it. Weil? Okay, so they took wild pairings over elliptic curves in a finite field, which is very interesting because it was some basic research that was done without an application. And I think this project speaks really well to, you never know when doing good research is going to actually lead to something really useful. Because they were able to use this for identity-based encryption. And briefly, identity-based encryption allows you to use an ASCII string as a public key. And then you can derive a private key, and this is very useful in many applications. And Dan Boneh made a company out of it, Voltage, which he sold for a ton of money. So very, very useful. Then Brent Waters, Amit Sahai, and several other people came up with attribute-based encryption based on identity-based encryption, which allows you to use various predicate strings as public key. And so what our team did, and I see several authors from this paper in the room, and I know Matt wasn't able to be here today, but he was really a lot of the brains behind this project. We did role-based access control using attribute-based encryption. So now I'm going to give you a 3-minute version of what should take an hour to explain, but I just want to give you the flavor of what we did. So in a hospital, you have different roles. You have, say, a nurse, doctor, pharmacist, secretary, and you'll have a medical records database. And not everybody needs to have access to every one of these columns. Like the secretary might need the name and billing, the pharmacist, the name and the prescriptions. The doctor will say everything, a nurse maybe some things. But in this time frame, in all the systems that I looked at, every one of them had access to everything. So there's no need for that. So what you can do is identify who are the players here, the roles of pharmacist, doctor, et cetera. And then you can assign predicates to the various database elements to say, or to the columns anyway, to say, okay, the disease, who needs to know that? The doctor and this person. The prescriptions, the doctor or the pharmacist. So you come up with logical statements and you actually make those, you put them in attribute-based encryption. They provided a library where you could put those into a logic that could resolve these. And so you would give credentials to each of the players in this, and these would be ASCII strings. Basically, I'm a doctor, nurse, pharmacist, whatever. And you'd use attribute-based encryption to generate the rest of the system. And what would happen is when someone presents their credentials, the expression gets evaluated. And if the expression evaluates to true, you have the key to decrypt that column. But in the event of a nurse, for example, you would only be able to decrypt the columns that you were assigned based on the logic that was set up. So we actually implemented this, and we had a smartphone version of it. And I wanted to give one example of some research that we did in the health and medical space. Almost done. So the current grant that I have is that we're in year 3 right now. So we have 2 more years, and I'm sticking around and working on this. And my students who are in the room, Logan and David, are very actively working and supported on this. And the idea is that you have everything is smart now, right? IoT devices, Internet of Things, your refrigerators, your toasters, your microwaves, everything has an IP address and is able to communicate. And let me just mention one of the problems that our group is working on. Say that I buy a house and I love smart things. So everything I buy is got an app for it and I can communicate with it. Some of the things in the house aren't part of the house. Like they're mine, like my smart vacuum or whatever. And some of the things are like the doorbell. And then I sell my house to someone. And so I need to transfer ownership of the house. I want to transfer all the things that are attached to the house to that person. But those devices are on my cloud account and my app tied to the things that I'm taking with me. And so there are all kinds of issues, and these aren't necessarily security issues. These are just like, how do you make it work issues, but they all come down to security and privacy when you look at it through the lens that I look at the world through. And so these are examples of the type of things that we're working on. So I wanted to leave myself a few minutes because I know most people don't retire at my age, and I'm not sailing off into the sunset, although that does sound like fun. What am I doing now? So I have a company called Harbor Labs that I started in 2011 to do consulting, and we have evolved. We now have 2 major business units. One is medical device security. Of course, I built up that expertise and knowledge over 10 years here with my lab, and I also hired many of the students who worked in that lab into Harbor Labs, like Paul and Mike, who are here. And we design, implement, and test security solutions. We recently submitted an RFP for a job and counted. We had 41 different types of systems, from infusion pumps, defibrillators, surgical robots, et cetera. I'll actually show you the list. And one of the things we do is we help our clients get FDA approval for the security of their devices so they can get certification. And the other side of the business, we testify in litigation in all different types of court cases you can see listed on the slide. These are the systems that we have worked on to date. And just so you might ask, well, what's an infusion pump? This is a device that you can hook up to somebody and it has medications in it. In the early days, you would go to the hospital and be treated with it. Then they were designed so they could be taken home, which opened up treatment for a lot of people who weren't very mobile and couldn't get to the hospital very easily. And then, of course, the next step is to make them smart, give them an IP address, let the doctor log in to the infusion pump and check, are you taking your medication? Do I need to change your dosage? Well, once that happens, it's kind of scary because now you're talking about someone's lives are in the balance from an internet attack. And you don't want the next botnet attack to take out a lot of people. So some of the work has to do with different operating system research, like separating out the clinical functions from the management functions and having them in completely separate operating systems with very limited interfaces between them. And you can see we're just applying a lot of the same concepts to a lot of different types of devices. As far as testimony, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. I testified last year in case Epic Games versus Apple. What happened was Epic Games makes Fortnite, which is the best-selling game. It's one of these, I think you shoot people or something like that. I'm not a gamer. And I know Benny is cringing right now if he's watching. And they decided that when you want to buy a new sword or whatever you get in the game, instead of going through the App Store for in-app payments, they would charge it directly to Epic. Epic wanted the money, and they didn't want to pay 30% to Apple. Well, Apple contacted Epic and said, well, you're violating our agreement because our agreement requires that you pay us 30%. You can't go out of band for that. And Epic ignored them. And so Apple took the best-selling game of all time out of the App Store. And so iPhone users couldn't get it or download it anymore. So Epic sued them. Why am I involved? Well, because Epic sued them for the world. Antitrust, every possible claim you can imagine they threw at them. And Apple wanted to show that, in fact, they need to do the App Store the way they do it for security reasons. And so that's what I testified to. And in about a month or two, I'm going to Australia to testify because Australia, Epic, Apple are different companies than US Epic Apple. And so they're running it all over again. We've testified in cases involving all of these companies listed here and a bunch of others that I can't mention publicly. And what I think about expert witness work is, yeah, it seems like people might just do that for money because it pays well, but actually you get insight into systems that you can't get in academia. I worked in academia, I wrote a book on firewalls, but when I was an expert witness for Palo Alto Networks, I got to look at the source code and talk to Nir Zook, the billionaire founder of Palo Alto Networks, and explaining to me the rationale with his design decisions. And that's the kind of access you don't get any other way. So I think it's fascinating. And the thing I remember is at some of the trials where I've testified, I'm there in court during the day. At night, I'm listening to the news and they're talking about that case. And they're completely misrepresenting what happened in the court, but that's another thing. So this is my last slide. Just talk about Harbor Labs because obviously I'm very excited about it. We are now at 18 full-time employees. We have 8 PhDs in the company, 2 of them from Hopkins, 4 MSSI alums, and 1 Hopkins business alum. When I started the company, I should say, I had this idea that I was going to require everyone to be in the office, and I wouldn't hire anyone that wouldn't move to Baltimore. And then COVID hit, and then I changed my policy, and now we have people, as you can see, all over the place. These are full-time technical employees. In 2017, smartest thing I did probably, hired Nick Uran, who was the president of a company that was a client of ours, as our CEO, and he is responsible, I think, for a lot of our success and our growth. We expect to be at 22 by the end of next quarter. We never took outside investment, so this was bootstrapped and using our own revenues to invest in the company. Last year, we grew revenues 48%. And so I'll end that by saying that although this is my retirement talk, Anne always jokes with people about, my retirement because she sees me working just as hard as I always did and just as enthusiastically, but instead of teaching and doing research, I'm now working at Harbor Labs. So again, I want to thank Hopkins for giving me the last 20 years of great academic career, great colleagues, great time. And I'm not forgetting, and I wanted to be an emeritus so I could keep the relationship going and see you guys from time to time. So thank you very much.
By the way,
Okay.
thank you, Avi. Thank you very much for those remarks and for giving us a view of your career. I will say that one thing I learned is that Avi is now, he always was, but he's certainly now the perfect faculty member. So that's I just realized.
One who leaves? One who leaves?
No. Still bringing in research dollars. still supervising students, and I don't have to pay him.
Well, wait, let me comment on that because I don't have a job anymore, so I make my money with speaking fees, and I need to know where to send my invoice because you invited me to speak here today, so.
Welcome, send it. But seriously, a souvenir of this event. So congratulations. This is to commemorate this event. Again, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. And we have a reception to continue.
Thank you.